The night Merwin Valen was sold to the Alpha King, the torches along the high black walls of the Stormhold Keep flared once and dimmed 3 times in a row, as though the fire itself was trying to warn her of something the room would not. And not one of the men and women lining the long hall in their fox furs and silver brooches understood that the man on the dark stone throne had already decided, in the back of his throat, that whichever sister of hers had put those iron rings on her wrists would not live to see another spring. They thought he had purchased a slave. They thought the chains at her wrists meant she would kneel. They thought the silence on his face was the cold patience of a buyer counting his coin. What they did not know was that King Luki of the Iron Wolf Pack had been searching for that scent for 5 long years, and had recognized it the moment the great doors opened, and had spent the last 40 heartbeats teaching his hands not to tremble on the arms of the throne. Merwin did not look at him. She kept her eyes on the floor, on the long band of dark stone that ran like a vein from the door to the dais, because she had been told that to meet a wolf king's gaze was to invite the bite, and because she had spent the last 7 days learning that survival was the art of keeping your breath quiet and your face still. Her sisters walked behind her, half a pace apart. Cybella in her good red wool, head high, pleased. Rayla in green silk, pretending boredom but watching everything. They had been told the king was a brute. They had been told he liked his slaves obedient. They had been told a great many things, and not one of those things had prepared them for the way the king sat very still on his throne and watched their youngest sister cross the hall as though she were the only living thing in it. Merwin did not feel like a woman being sold. She felt like a deer at the edge of a clearing, the kind that knows the meadow is wrong before it knows why. A small voice in her head, the voice that had kept her alive through 6 months of her father's slow dying and 3 months of her sister's careful cruelty, said, "Count the doors, count the windows, find the wind." She counted 3 doors, she counted no windows, she found no wind. The chamberlain at the dais read the bill of sale in a thin, nervous voice. He read the sum. He read the debt. He read the seal of House Valen, which had been her father's house, and which now belonged to her sisters. He read the part that said the youngest daughter of Lord Edrich Valen, Merwin of Highmoor, was offered in full and final settlement of the debt, and that her person, her labor, and her name passed from this hour into the keeping of the Iron Wolf throne. Cybella's small, careful smile was the same smile she had worn the morning after their father died. The morning Merwin had run into his bedchamber and found him cold under the linens with a wine cup tipped over by his hand. The morning Cybella had laid her arm around Merwin's shoulders and said, in a voice as smooth as cream, "Hush, sister. He is gone. We must be brave together now." She had been 22 and Merwin had been 17, and Merwin had believed her, because a person who has just lost her father will believe almost anything that comes wrapped in soft hands. She did not believe Cybella now. She had learned, slowly and at considerable cost, that the smile meant a stone had just been added to a wall. The king did not speak. The chamberlain finished. The hall waited for the king to acknowledge the sale, and the king did not. He sat on his throne with his hands flat on the dark wood of the arms, and his head was tilted slightly, the way a hound tilts its head when it has heard a sound the rest of the room has missed. And his eyes, Merwin could see them now, against her own better judgment, because she had glanced up for one breath and could not look away. His eyes were the color of winter water, gray and clear and absolutely awake. They were not the eyes of a man buying a slave. They were the eyes of a man recognizing something he had been told he would never find. Cybella stirred. She did not like being made to wait. "My lord king," she said in her courteous voice, the voice she used at festivals, "if the price has displeased you." "The price," Luki said. His voice was quieter than Merwin had expected. It was rougher. It was the voice of a man who did not waste his breath on people he did not respect. "The price," he said again, slowly, as though he were tasting the word and finding it foul, "is acceptable." He did not look at Cybella when he said it. He looked at Merwin. "Bring her forward," he said. 2 of his guards in their gray cloaks stepped to her shoulders. They did not touch her. One of them, the older of the 2, gestured with an open hand. "Come, my lady," he said. He said it like an apology. Merwin walked to the foot of the dais. Her bare feet were cold against the stone. Her wrists ached where the iron had rubbed them raw on the road. She did not kneel. The sisters had warned her to kneel. She had decided, somewhere on the road north, that there were things she could not stop and things she could, and the angle of her own knees was one of the things she could. The king saw it. She watched him see it. Something moved in his face that was not anger and was not surprise. It was, she thought, almost like grief, as though he had hoped she would still be standing and was not yet sure how to feel about being right. He rose from the throne. The hall shifted, 100 small motions of furs and skirts, and held breath. He was very tall. He came down the 3 shallow steps of the dais one at a time, and he stopped a full pace before he reached her, and he did not put a hand on her, and he did not lean down, and he said, in a voice meant only for her, "You will not kneel in this hall, not tonight, not ever." She did not understand. She did not have a word for what he had just said. He turned his head. He spoke now to the chamberlain, to the hall, to the sisters who had begun to sense, in the small animal way that schemers do, that something in their plan had gone badly off the rail. "The bill is paid," the king said. "The Lady Merwin of Highmoor is a guest of this hall under the personal protection of the Iron Wolf throne. Strike the chain from her wrists. Bring her wine. Bring her warmth. Whoever raises a hand to her under this roof raises a hand to me." The chamberlain's mouth opened. It did not close again for some time. Cybele took a step forward. She had the sense finally to look afraid. "My lord," she said, "there has been some misunderstanding." The king's eyes moved to her. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "There has been no misunderstanding," he said. "I understand your business, lady, very well. We will speak of it tomorrow. Tonight you will be shown to a chamber under guard. You will not leave it. Your sister will not be touched. Are we agreed?" Cybele was not agreed. Cybele's face had the look of a woman who had counted her coins 3 times and was beginning to suspect a forgery. But she nodded. She had no choice. The guards were already moving. Merwin felt the iron come off her wrists. She felt the chain hit the floor. She felt, somewhere far inside her chest, a thing she had not allowed herself to feel in many months, a small, unwise, dangerous thing called hope. The king said, very low, "Look at me." She looked. He said, "Do you remember me?" She did not. She shook her head once. She was so tired. She was so confused. She was standing in a hall full of strangers, and a king who should have been her owner had just refused in front of his entire court to own her, and was now asking her if she remembered him with a softness in his face she did not know what to do with. "No, my lord," she said, "I do not." He closed his eyes for one breath. When he opened them, the softness was gone, locked away, but not before she had seen it. "That is all right," he said. "There is time." 2 months earlier, Merwin had been sitting on the cold stone floor of her father's wine cellar, holding his hand, watching him try to speak through a mouth that could no longer make the shape of her name. He had been a kind man. He had not been a strong one. That had been the great secret of House Valen, the secret nobody outside the walls knew, and the secret the walls had kept badly. Lord Edrich Valen had loved his 4 daughters and had not protected any of them. And now he was dying in the cellar he had hidden in for 3 days because he had finally understood, too late, that the cup at his table was poisoned, and the hand pouring it was his eldest girl's. He had crawled. He had actually crawled down the cellar steps, vomiting silently into his own sleeve so that no one would hear. Merwin had found him by accident, looking for a candle. And she had not screamed because somewhere deep in the bottom of her, a small clear voice had said, "If you scream, you die next." She had sat with him instead. She had held his hand. He had looked at her with his pupils blown wide and his mouth working, and the last thing he had said, very faintly, was a single word that sounded almost like song. It had not been song, it had been her mother's name, Lyanna. Her mother had died bringing Merwin into the world 18 winters before, in a snowstorm so bad the midwife had not been able to come. Her father had told her once, when she was small, that her mother had sung through the whole birth. Sung, he said, like a woman who knew a secret nobody else in the room knew. Sung until the storm broke and the baby came, and Lyanna laid Merwin against her chest and looked at her husband and smiled and said, "She has the song." Then she had closed her eyes and not opened them again. Merwin had never understood what her mother meant. She had asked her father 100 times growing up, and 100 times he had said only, "Your mother was a Songweaver child from the high north. There are not many of them left. Be patient. The song will come to you when it needs to." She had stopped asking by the time she was 12 because the answer never grew any larger. She thought of it now, in the cellar, holding her dying father's hand. She thought it was a strange word to be the last thing he said. Her father stopped breathing on a Tuesday afternoon at the hour when the cook usually rang the bell for tea. Merwin closed his eyes. She climbed the cellar steps. She walked into the great room where her 3 sisters were gathered around the fire, and she said, "Father is gone." Cybele did not look surprised. That was the thing Merwin would remember afterward. Cybele, the eldest, did not look surprised. "Oh, sister," Cybele said, and rose and wrapped her arms around Merwin's shoulders. "Oh, sweet sister, hush, hush. We must be brave together now." Rayla, the second sister, the one who had always followed Cybele's lead the way a shadow follows a body, made a small choked noise that was meant to be a sob. The third sister, Isel, was 16 and had been crying already because she was the youngest of the 3 older girls and was always crying. None of them asked where their father had been found. None of them asked what he had eaten. None of them, Merwin realized in the days that followed, asked any of the questions a person asks when a sudden death is a real surprise to them. The household called it a fit of the heart. The Meisters called it a fit of the heart. The priests prayed over him and called it a fit of the heart. And Cybele stood at the head of the table in their father's place and said, in her warmest voice, "We must hold together, sisters. The estate is mine now by the laws of inheritance. We will mind it together. None of us shall want for anything." It took her 3 months to sell Merwin. The plan, when Merwin finally understood it, was almost insultingly simple. Their father had been late on a small tribute owed to the Northern Pack's 3 winters running. The actual sum was not large. House Valen could have settled it with the autumn rents. But Cybele had not paid the autumn rents into the tribute. Cybele had paid the autumn rents into a chest in her own bedchamber. And then Cybele had ridden north under heavy escort to the Alpha King's marshal, and presented the unpaid tribute with an air of grave apology, and had inquired, with her eyes very wide, whether the matter might be settled in flesh, in the old way, since House Valen had been so unfortunately reduced by Lord Edrich's untimely passing. The marshal had been a hard man. He had said, "The king does not take slaves." "Oh," Cybele had said with that small, careful smile, "but the law provides for it, does it not? In ancient cases of dishonored debt, I would not wish to dishonor my dear sister's name by burying her in poverty. She is so very young, so very pretty. The king's hall would be a finer life for her than the one we can offer." The marshal had been a hard man, but he was also the king's marshal, and the king had been searching for a particular scent for 5 years. The marshal did not know about the scent. The marshal knew only that a delegation had arrived bearing tribute and a young woman who, the head sister claimed, was offered freely in slave bond. And the marshal had said the words he had been instructed to say in any case where slave bond was offered to the throne: "I will inform the king. Bring the offering at the next moon." Cybele had ridden home and told Merwin nothing. She had told Merwin instead that they were going north to attend the autumn court, and that Merwin must look her best, and that she would have a husband by the new year if she behaved. Merwin had not believed any of it, because Cybele had no plans to find Merwin a husband, but she had not understood the rest of it either. She had packed her one good dress. She had said goodbye to the kitchen women who had raised her, and to old Bran the kennel master who had taught her how to read the wind, and to the gray cat who lived in the stable. She had kissed her father's grave on the morning they rode out. The chains had come 3 nights into the journey. They had taken her dress and given her a rough wool shift. Cybele had said in her warmest voice, "It is only for the ceremony, sweet sister. It is the old way. It will be over very quickly, and after we shall send for you." Isel, the youngest, had not been able to look at her. Isel had ridden the rest of the way with her eyes on the road. Merwin had taken that, in her exhaustion and grief, as the only honesty offered her in 3 months. She had been brought through the gates of Stormhold in the chains. She had been held one night in a stone room by the kitchen. She had been walked into the great hall in the rough shift with her hair loose down her back, and she had counted the trees along the courtyard road and the windows of the keep and the breath in her own ribs, because that was what one did when one was about to be sold. She had not expected the king to refuse to buy her. She did not, sitting now on the edge of an enormous bed in a tower room with a fire in the grate and a dog of some kind asleep on a rug at her feet, know what to expect at all. The dog on the rug was not, on closer inspection, a dog. It was a half-grown wolf pup, the size of a young deerhound, with thick gray fur and one black ear and one gray, and it had been delivered to Merwin's room sometime in the long hour while a pair of women bathed her cuts and dressed her in a clean linen shift and combed the road out of her hair. The pup had walked in behind the women on its own 4 feet, as if it had been invited. The older of the 2 women, a brisk brown-haired healer who had introduced herself only as Myra, had glanced at the pup's side and said, "That is Ash. Ash belongs to nobody. Ash decides where Ash sleeps. If you do not want him, set him outside the door. He will not be offended." Merwin had not set him outside the door. She sat on the edge of the bed now in the warm linen shift with her hair drying down her back and a clay cup of something hot between her palms, and she watched the pup breathe. She did not know what to do with her hands. She did not know what to do with the room. The room was larger than the kitchen of her father's house. There was a fire. There was a window of real glass. There was a wooden chest at the foot of the bed in which someone had placed 3 folded dresses of plain wool in colors she had not yet looked at. There was a small wooden bowl on the bedside table containing apples. There was also a door, a heavy door, a door with a great iron bolt on the inside. Myra had pointed at the bolt before she left. "That is yours," the healer had said plainly. "It locks from your side. No one comes through it without your leave. Not the king, not me, not the kitchen girls. You sleep with it shut. Do you understand me, child?" Merwin had nodded because she had not trusted her own voice. Myra had left. The door had closed. Merwin had walked over to it very slowly and touched the bolt with her fingertips and slid it home. The sound of the iron sliding into the slot had made something in her chest fold in half. She had cried then. She had not cried when her father died. She had not cried in the chains. She cried now, on the floor of a tower room in a castle she did not know, with her back against a door that locked from her side, and the pup Ash padded over and pressed his warm forehead against her knee, and sighed the small concerned sigh of a creature who knew when a body was breaking. She slept. She did not remember meaning to. She woke at first light with her cheek against the rug and the pup curled against her ribs. The morning came in pale and silver through the glass window. Stormhold in daylight was a different country from Stormhold at night. From the window, Merwin could see down across a courtyard of dark slate to a market square where stalls were already opening, and beyond that a wall of tall pines climbing up a steep ridge of mountain, and beyond that, faint and very far, a horizon of white peaks. The air that came through the window when she opened it smelled of wood smoke and pine sap, and the particular sharp cold of a place where snow was not far off. There was a soft tap at the door. She held her breath. A small voice said from the other side, "My lady, it is only Will. I have brought you bread." She did not know any Will, but the voice was a child's voice. She slid the bolt and opened the door a hand's width. A boy stood in the corridor. He was perhaps 8 years old. He had black hair that stuck up in 3 different directions and a face that had clearly been scrubbed against its will not long ago. He held a wooden tray with 2 slices of brown bread, a small dish of butter, and a clay pot of honey. "Myra said I could carry it up," the boy said proudly. "She said I could. I am Will. I am the king's ward, sort of. I live in the kitchens. May I come in? Merwin opened the door the rest of the way. Will set the tray down on the chest at the foot of the bed and turned and looked at her with the unself-conscious frank curiosity of a child who has not yet been taught to pretend disinterest. "You are pretty," he announced. "Myra said you were sad. You don't look sad. You look tired." A small, surprised laugh fell out of Merwin's mouth. It startled her. It was the first laugh that had come out of her in something like 4 months. "I am tired," she said. "That is fair," Will said. He sat down cross-legged on the rug as though he visited tower rooms every day. "I would be tired too. Myra says you came a long way. Did you come on a horse? I love horses. I am not allowed to ride yet because I am too small, but I am going to be tall soon, Myra says." He chattered. He chattered for 10 unbroken minutes about horses and about the kitchen cat and about the king's commander, a man called Roderick, who had once let Will polish a sword, and about how the bread he had brought was made by the head baker's wife who had a temper but baked the best bread in the keep. He did not ask Merwin a single question about herself. He did not ask why she had come, or who she was, or whether she belonged. He simply absorbed her into the small, loose family of beings he had decided to like. When he ran out of things to say, he sat for a moment, his small face thoughtful, and then he reached into the pocket of his tunic and pulled out something small and wooden and held it up. It was a carving of a wolf, the size of his thumb, crude but loved. One ear was chipped. "This is for luck," Will said. "The king carves them. He gave me one when I came here. He gave Myra one. He gives one to anyone he likes. I think you should have a new one. He is very good at carving, but he never gives himself credit. Goodbye, my lady." He set the carving on the chest beside the bread, got up, dusted his knees, and was out of the room before Merwin could say anything in reply. She sat for a long time looking at the small wooden wolf. "The king carves them." She picked up the carving. The wood was smoothed where a thumb had rubbed it many times. It was warm from the boy's pocket. She turned it over and there, on the flat under the belly, was a small mark scratched in with a knife. A single rune she did not know. Her hand was trembling. She set the carving down again, very carefully on the chest. There was another tap at the door, much later in the morning. This time it was Myra with a fresh shift and a request, gently delivered. "His Grace would speak with you," Myra said. "In his small audience room, not the great hall. He asks if you feel strong enough. He says you may say no. He says you may say no for as many days as you need to say no, and he will not ask again until you tell him to ask. Those were his words. I am to wait for your answer." Merwin looked at Myra. She looked at the small wooden wolf on the chest. She looked at the dog called Ash, who was now eating crumbs of bread off the tray with a delicate dignity that suggested he believed the bread had been put there for him. "I will see him," she said. Myra's face, which had been carefully blank, allowed itself a small crease of something that might have been relief. "I will send for the boy to lead you down when you are ready," Myra said. "Take your time. He is the king. He will wait." The small audience room was not what Merwin expected. It was paneled in dark wood and warmed by a fire and contained a low table and 2 carved chairs and almost nothing else. There were no guards. There was no chamberlain. There was only the king, in a plain black tunic without his crown, sitting in one of the chairs with a length of hide and a small knife in his hands and a half-shaped piece of wood between them. He set the knife down when she came in. He stood. He gestured to the second chair. He did not approach her. "Sit, please," he said, "or do not as you wish." She sat. Her knees were grateful for it. He sat across from her. The half-carved wood went into a leather pouch at his belt. He folded his hands in his lap. He looked at her the way a man looks at a thing he is afraid of losing if he looks too long. "I owe you," he said, "more apologies than I am able to make in a single morning. I should like to make one of them now, if you will permit me." She nodded. She did not know what to say. "Last night," he said carefully, "I named you a guest of this hall. I did so because the alternative to acknowledge the slave bond your sister offered, would have bound you to me under a law I do not honor and have no intention of honoring. I did not consult you because there was no time. I should still have consulted you. I am sorry." She found she could speak after all. Her voice was small, but it worked. "You did not buy me, my lord." "No. You paid the debt." "I paid the debt your father in fact owed, which was small. The remainder of the sum your sister demanded was a fiction. I paid that too, because to refuse it would have been to send you home with her. I did not think that would be wise." "It would not have been wise," Merwin said. The room went quiet for a moment. He looked at her, she looked at him. He was, she now had time to notice, perhaps 30 years old. There was a long thin scar through his left eyebrow and another along the side of his throat. His hair was dark and not very tidy. His hands, folded in his lap, were the hands of a man who had used them. "My lord," she said slowly, because there was a question rising inside her she had to ask. "Last night you asked if I remembered you." "Yes." "Why?" He did not answer at once. He looked down at his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were that gray winter water color again, and she thought again, as she had in the great hall, that no one had told her a king of wolves could look like that. "I will tell you," he said, "but not yet. You have not slept enough. You have not eaten enough. You have not been in this house long enough to know whether you wish to stay in it. I will not load that on you today." He paused. He chose his next words with the care of a man stepping on river stones. "I will tell you instead," he said, "a small thing about a fair at Greycliff 5 years ago in the autumn." Something in Merwin's chest gave a small sharp pull. "Greycliff," she said. "Greycliff," he said. "There was a trader at the autumn fair. He had a cage, and in the cage he had what he called a beast. He told the crowd it was a rogue wolf he had taken on the road. He charged a copper to look at it. He charged 2 coppers to spit at it. He charged 5 coppers to throw stones." Merwin sat very still. "On the second night of the fair," the king said, "very late when the trader was drunk, a girl came to the cage. She was perhaps 13. She had a green ribbon tied in her hair and dust on the front of her dress because she had been kneeling somewhere. She had stolen a key from the trader's belt while he slept against a barrel. She did not know what kind of beast was in the cage. She knew only that it was bleeding from a stone above its eye and that it had stopped trying to lift its head. She opened the cage. She put a piece of bread inside. She put a wooden cup of clean water inside. She took off her own cloak and she laid it over the beast where the stones had cut its shoulders." Merwin could not breathe. "And she said to the beast," the king said very quietly, she said, "Run, you are safe with me, I will not tell." The room was so quiet Merwin could hear the fire breathing. "My lord," she said. Then she put the key back into the trader's hand, the king said, while he slept, so no one would think to blame her, and she walked back to her father's tent and she went to bed, and she never told anyone what she had done, and the beast ran. The beast ran north for 3 nights on 3 legs because the 4th had been broken when they took it, and when it could not run any more, it lay down in a hollow tree and waited, and on the 4th dawn his guards found him, and they brought him home." Merwin put her hands over her face. "I am the beast," King Luki said. "Lady Merwin, I have been searching for the green ribbon and the dust and the small voice that said, 'You are safe with me' for 5 years, and last night your sister walked you into my hall in chains." Merwin could not stop the small sound that came out of her then. It was not a sob. It was not a laugh. It was the noise a person makes when a door inside them, a door they had thought sealed forever, opens. She remembered. She remembered as if it had been yesterday. The torches at the fair, the smell of the cage, the weight of the cloak in her hands, the way the beast's golden gray eye had looked up at her with such tired, patient attention that she had known, at 13, that he was not a beast at all. She had told no one, not her father, not the cook, not old Bran. She had thought sometimes, in the years after, that she had dreamed it. "I never told," she said into her hands. "I never even told myself." "I know," he said. His voice had gone very gentle. "That is part of why I have spent 5 years looking. I had no name to ask after. I had a green ribbon and a kindness and a voice. I had your scent on the cloak, which I kept. I rode through every southern town I could find a reason to ride through. Hopping a market wind would put it back into my nose. I never caught it. I had begun to think I had imagined you. She lowered her hands. And then my sister. And then your sister, he said, walked you into my hall. She looked at him. He looked at her. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. I am sorry, he said at last, for what your sister has done. I am sorry that the way I came to find you was the worst possible way it could have happened. I am sorry that you do not know me. I am sorry that you owe me nothing and I owe you everything. And I am asking you, lady, to stay here for as long as it takes you to decide what you want next. Not as my slave, not as my guest, just as a woman who is owed a quiet room and a locked door in time. Merwin reached, without quite meaning to, for the small wooden wolf the boy Will had given her. She had carried it down to the audience room in the pocket of her dress. She set it on the table between them. He said you carved them, she said. The king looked at the small wolf. Something in his face softened. I have carved one a year, he said, since I was 18 and recovering from a broken leg in my mother's hall. I did not always know who they were for. There are 6 of them. The one in your hand is the 7th. She held it tighter. I will stay, she said. He closed his eyes for a long breath. When he opened them, they were wet. Thank you, King Loki said. The next morning, the king's commander, a tall, hard-eyed man called Roderick, came up to Merwin's tower room with a careful face and a particular request. My lady, he said, hat in hand at her doorway because he had not stepped inside, I am to interview your sisters today. The king has given me leave to pursue the matter of the false debt, the matter of your father's death, and any matter besides which seems worth pursuing. I did not wish to begin without your knowledge. You may come down if you wish. You may stay where you are if you wish. You may also tell me anything you would like me to ask. I will keep your name out of it as far as I can. Merwin thought about it for the time it took to draw a breath. I will come down, she said. Roderick nodded once. I thought you might. She did not go in the dress they had given her. She went in a plain gray wool, her hair tied back in a single braid, her wrists bare. She wanted Cybella to look at her wrists and see no chain. She wanted Cybella to see also the woman she was when she was not being walked into a hall to be sold. The room they had given the sisters was a kind of guest hall on the lower floor, comfortable enough, but with 2 guards on the door. Cybella rose from her chair when Merwin came in, with the small, surprised laugh of a hostess greeted by an unexpected friend. Sister, she said. Oh, sister, what a fright you gave us all. I have been so worried. Come, sit. Let us speak plainly. There has been a terrible misunderstanding. Merwin did not sit. She stood near the door, a careful distance from her eldest sister, and she folded her hands in front of her and she said, Cybella, the king knows you forged the debt. Cybella's smile did not move. Sister. He knows you forged the debt, Merwin said again in the same level voice. He is generous enough to want to ask you why. I am here to listen, not to lie for you. Rayla in the corner made the small intake of breath of a person who had been trying to convince herself for a week that she was not in serious trouble and had just understood that she was. Isel, the youngest of the 3 older girls, sat with her hands knotted in her lap and her eyes on the floor. Isel had not looked up since Merwin walked in. Cybella looked at Merwin for a long second, then her smile did move. It went slowly into something else, something colder, the face under the smile. Then you have been clever, sister, she said. I had not expected that. You always were the best at hiding what you were. Roderick stepped in. Roderick was a man who did not like the sound of family ruining itself in front of him for an audience. Lady Cybella, he said, you stand before me on charges of false plea before the Iron Wolf throne, of the unlawful sale of a free woman of the southern lands, of the misappropriation of House Valen rents, and pending review of the Meister's account of your father's last days, of poisoning Lord Edrich Valen, your sworn lord and your father. Do you wish to speak in your defense? Cybella's eyes went to Roderick. Cybella's jaw worked. I had a better offer, she said. Roderick waited. For her, Cybella jerked her chin at Merwin without looking at her. There was a better offer from a different pack. They wanted her. They were willing to pay for her. They told me to bring her here in a slave bond first, to make her travel safely under royal protection, and then they would take her from the road back. The Iron Wolf debt was a way to put her on the road north without her running. They said it would be quick. They said she would not be harmed. They said she would have a fine life as a high lady in another land. I believed them. Roderick did not blink. The pack. The Blackmore, Cybella said. They're Alpha. He is called, she hesitated. He is called Sigvald Mareth. He sent a man with a sealed letter and a chest of silver. The letter said only that he had heard our father's youngest had her mother's gift, and he wished to court her properly, and her sisters would do well to deliver her north into his keeping rather than waste her on a southern boy. Merwin felt the floor of her stomach tilt. My mother's gift, she said. Cybella looked at her finally, and there was, for 1 second, real emotion in her sister's face. It was envy. It was old, deep, careful envy that had been growing in her for 18 years. You don't even know, Cybella said. You don't even know what you are, do you? Father never told you. He thought he was protecting you. He thought if you didn't know, no one else would. He was a fool, sister. He was such a fool. Mother was a Songweaver of the far north, and Mother could heal with her voice, and Mother could break a silver bond with a single note, and Mother was being hunted by every pack in 3 kingdoms when she ran south to marry our father. The Blackmore knew. The Blackmore have always known. They have been waiting for you to come of age. I gave them the chance. I will not pretend I am sorry for it. They offered to take you, to leave the rest of us alone, and to send me enough silver to keep this house for the rest of my life. I took the offer. I took the offer the night Father caught me reading the letter. He told me I would do it over his dead body. I obliged him. The room went absolutely still. Roderick very softly said, Lady Cybella, you are confessing to the murder of your father. Cybella did not look at him. She looked at Merwin. He left me nothing, sister, she said. He left me nothing. He gave the songs and the gift and the smile and the way he looked at us when you walked into a room. He looked at you like you were the sun coming up. He looked at me like I was the chair you were going to sit in. You will never know what it is to be the chair, Merwin. You will never know. Merwin could not move. Her sister's voice had become the voice of a stranger, a voice she had never heard before, and it was telling her things that rearranged 18 years of her own memory at once. Her father's hand always going to her hair first at the supper table. The careful way he had taught her to read by the kitchen fire, while the other 3 were at lessons in the cold schoolroom. The lullaby he had hummed to her, only to her, that none of her sisters had ever been hummed. She had not noticed. She had been the favorite, and she had been the favorite the way water is wet, without thinking, without questioning, without understanding what it was costing the others to watch her be loved. It did not excuse murder. It did not excuse selling. But for the first time in her life, Merwin looked at Cybella and saw her, and the seeing was like looking down a well that had been at her elbow her whole life and had never been drawn from. I am sorry, Merwin said. The words came out of her without her permission. Sister, I am sorry I did not see. Cybella laughed. It was not a kind laugh. It was a tired one. Save your sorry, little sister, she said. Save your sorry for your Wolf King. He'll need it. The Blackmore will be coming. They'll be coming because I sent word 3 days before we left that I had her in chains and was bringing her north. And the Blackmore do not give up a thing they have decided is theirs. Sigvald will come for you, sister. He will come for you here. And the king of the Iron Wolves had better be ready. Roderick was already moving for the door. Hold them, he said to the guards. Both elder sisters. The young one, he glanced at Isel, who had still not looked up, the young one separately. I will speak with the king. In the corridor outside, with the door shut and the guards already moving to their posts, Merwin caught Roderick's sleeve. The commander stopped. He looked down at her with a face that had carefully arranged itself into nothing. The Blackmore, she said. Sigvald, are they real? Is she telling the truth, or is she trying to make me afraid? Roderick's jaw moved. Both, he said after a moment. Sigvald Marith is real. He is the alpha of a pack 3 days' ride to the east. He has been a thorn in the king's side for a decade. He has been quiet for a year. Too quiet, our scouts said. Now we know why. He paused. He looked at her and there was something almost tender in his stern face. You should not be afraid, my lady, not in this hall. The king will not let them have you. I am not afraid for me, she said. She surprised herself by it. She surprised Roderick too. I'm afraid, she said slowly, for Him. Roderick looked at her for a long moment. Then he gave her the smallest, most careful smile she had ever seen on a soldier's face. My lady, he said, with respect, the king has been afraid for himself on his own behalf for 30 years. It will do him good to have someone else share the work. Then he was gone down the corridor at a quick stride, and Merwin stood alone in the lamplit hall with the small carved wolf in her pocket pressing against her hip like a hand. She thought, for the first time since her father died, I have something I want to protect. She thought, I do not even know how yet. She set off back up the tower stairs to find Myra. Myra was in the lower garden when Merwin found her, kneeling among rows of late autumn herbs with her sleeves rolled to her elbows and a small basket of cuttings at her hip. The garden ran along the south wall of the keep, where the sun was kindest, and even in the cold of the northern autumn, it smelled of rosemary and hawthorn and the faint sweet rot of last apples. Merwin knelt beside her without asking. The pup Ash, who had attached himself to her now and would not be parted, flopped down in a sunny patch and began to chew thoughtfully on a fallen twig. Myra looked up. Myra looked at Merwin's face. Myra, who Merwin was beginning to understand did not waste questions, said, "What did your sister say to you?" She said, Merwin said carefully, that my mother was a songweaver, that I have a gift, that a pack to the east has been waiting for me to come of age, that my father was killed because he would not let me be sold to them. Myra stopped working. Myra sat back on her heels and wiped her hands on her apron and looked at Merwin with the steady, considering look of a woman, deciding which truth to tell first. The first thing is true, Myra said. The second is true. The third is true also and is older than your sister knows, and we will speak of it. Stand up, child. Walk with me. The garden has too many ears. They walked. Myra led her along a path that curved up the slope of the keep grounds toward a stand of old yew trees that had been there longer than the walls. There was a stone bench under the largest of them. Myra sat. Merwin sat. Ash settled at their feet with a small huff. Listen, Myra said. I will be plain. The Songweavers were the healers and the keepers of the high north before any of these packs were named. They were not wolves. They were women and a few men who could shape sound the way a smith shapes iron. Their voices could mend a cut. Their voices could close a wound. Their voices could break a silver chain, which is the only thing that can hold a wolf-bound man against his will, and which is why the packs began to fear them and bargain with them, and at last, in some sad places, hunt them. Your mother's line was hunted. She fled south. She fell in love with your father. She told no one but him what she was. She bore him 4 daughters, and the gift skipped the elder 3 as it sometimes does and came to the youngest. To you, your father knew. Your mother told him before she died. He swore to her he would never let any pack lay hand on you. He kept that vow until your sister put the knife in him. Merwin was quiet a long time. How did you know all this? She asked at last. Myra's mouth twitched in a small private way. Because, child, I am also of the line, far back, 2 generations. My grandmother was a songweaver of the upper rivers. The gift did not come to my mother and did not come to me, but the knowing did. The knowing is a smaller thing, but it is a real thing. I came to this keep 10 years ago because the king's mother sent for me. The king's mother was kind. The king's mother was also afraid. She had heard there was a girl in the south the Blackmore were watching. She wanted me close at hand against the day. His mother knew about me. His mother saved her son's life when he came home with 3 legs and silver in his shoulder 5 years ago, Myra said. She knew her son had been spared by a girl with a green ribbon in her hair. She knew the girl was probably you. She did not live to see you. She made me promise that when you came I would be ready. Merwin pressed her hands against her knees to keep them still. Will you teach me, she said, if there is a gift, if it is real, will you teach me how to use it before they come? Myra looked at her. Myra's face went, for one moment, very tender. It was the look of a woman who had wanted to be asked exactly that question for 10 years. Yes, she said, I will. They began that afternoon. They began in the small chapel below the keep that had not been used for worship in 2 generations because the room was empty and the door was thick and the stone walls did not let sound out. Myra lit one candle. She set Merwin against the far wall. She put her own back against the door. She said, hum, just hum, not a tune. Whatever sound your throat wants, close your eyes, do not try to be anything. Do not try. Merwin closed her eyes, she hummed. It was an embarrassed sound, thin and uncertain. Nothing happened. Again, Myra said, quieter, lower. Find the place in your chest where you are tired and hum from there. Merwin hummed from the place in her chest where she was tired. The note came out lower, steadier. The candle on the floor between them flickered sideways as though someone had passed close to it. Myra said softly, there it is. By the 3rd day, Merwin could make a small white gold light bloom in her cupped palms, the size of a walnut, when she hummed in the way Myra had begun to teach her. By the 7th day, she could close a small cut on the back of her own hand by humming over it. By the 10th, she had healed the bruised paw of Ash the pup, who had jumped wrong off a wall and had felt a kind of warm tide go out of her own ribs and into the dog's foot, and had nearly fainted afterward, and Myra had said, yes. There is always a price, always remember that. Lukey did not interrupt these lessons. He did not visit the chapel. He did not ask what happened in it. He came to Merwin in the evenings, in the small audience room where they had spoken on the first morning, and he sat across from her with his hands folded and asked her how her day had been, and she told him only the small things, and he listened to the small things as if they were the only things in the world. He spoke of his own day in the same currency. The dispute he had settled between 2 ranchers over a ram. The letter he had received from the Southern Court, which had begun to suspect, very late, that something in the matter of House Valen would not be allowed to lie quiet. The new horse in the stable that had bitten the stable master twice, and was therefore probably going to be the king's favorite horse for the rest of its life. He made her laugh. She had not expected that of him. He was dry and a little wry, and he had a way of telling a story about a fool that did not name the fool but somehow made you understand that the fool had been him. On the 17th night, he said, tomorrow night I would like to walk with you in the upper garden after supper. There is a frost coming. I would like you to see the stars before the cloud comes in. She said yes. He paused, he looked at her. His hands on the table did not fidget, he never fidgeted, but the air around his hands fidgeted on his behalf. I should also, he said, say something to you that I have been failing to say for 2 weeks. I would like you to know I am not courting you. I do not mean to court you while you are still a guest under my roof and dependent upon my hospitality. The imbalance is not a thing I am willing to use. I want you to know I am not using it. When you are well, when the matter of your sisters is settled, when you are free to leave this hall under your own choice and your own coin, and you will be, then, if you wish me to court you, I will. Until then, the walks and the suppers and the small audience room are not bargains. They are only what they look like. They are friendship. Do you understand? I understand, she said. Thank you. He looked relieved. Then, very quietly, almost to himself, he said, although the wolf in me is not friendship-minded, and you should know it for the truth. She blinked, the wolf in you. He smiled. It was a tired smile and an honest one. There is the man, he said, and there is the wolf. The man speaks careful words about hospitality and imbalance and friendship. The wolf walks behind him and growls. The wolf has been growling since the doors of the great hall opened. The wolf is, at this moment, lying in front of the door of your tower room every night between midnight and dawn. I cannot stop him. I have tried. I am telling you so you will know. If you do not want him there, say so. He will mind, he will sulk, he will mind. Merwin sat very still. "He has been outside my door at night," she said. "From midnight to dawn," Luki said. "Every night for 14 nights." "Why?" He looked at his hands. "Because the keep has many corridors, and you do not yet know who walks them, and the wolf wants to know that nothing comes within 10 paces of your door without his nose on it." She did not know what to say to that. She said, "Tell him thank you." He looked up, he looked at her. His face did something complicated. "I will," he said. The Blackmore came on the night of the first hard frost. They came not as an army, because Sigvald Marith was clever, and an army would have brought the Iron Wolf banners up onto the mountain pass. They came as a small fire set. 12 men in dark cloaks slipped over the south wall in 2s and 3s through the small mercy of a guard who had been bought 3 months earlier and had spent every night since regretting his purse. They lit the lower stables first, because the smoke would draw the keep's defenders down, and the lower stables had only one boy sleeping in them, a boy who had been bought as well. The stable boy had not gone to his post that night. The stable boy had gone, instead, to Roderick finally at sundown, white in the face, and confessed everything, and Roderick had thanked him and put him in a cell for his own safety, and had tripled the watch on the south wall and had not told the king. He had not told the king because Luki was in the upper garden walking with Merwin under the early stars, and Roderick, like every man in that keep, had decided that the king would have one evening of stars before the world came back for him. It was a kindness. It was, in the event, almost a fatal one. Merwin had seen the comet. She did not know it was a comet. She had only thought it was a strange star, low and bright above the pines, with a smear of white behind it like a thumbprint of milk on the sky. She had asked Luki what it was. He had stopped on the path with her on his arm. They were walking arm in arm now, in the small, careful way they had begun to walk, his sleeve against hers and nothing else, and had looked up and said, "A wandering star, my lady." The southern almanacs call it Malia's tear. It comes once in a long while, and it is supposed to mean. He stopped. He stopped because he had smelled something the wind had carried over the south wall, and his head had turned sharply toward the lower courtyard, and his whole body had gone stone still in the way Merwin was beginning to recognize. "Smoke," he said. "Merwin, get behind me." She did not get behind him. She did not even think about it. She turned with him. The lower stables were already burning. The orange of it was climbing the south wall, up through the slits of the keep, and a thin, terrible scream of horses came from below. Roderick Luki breathed. "I am here, my king." Roderick was already up the path, sword in his hand, 3 of his guard behind him. "It is not horses we worry for. The fire is a draw, 12 men over the wall by the count of the stable boy. The boy came to me at sundown. I posted men. We will hold the lower hall. You must hold the upper. They will come for her." He did not have to say who. He looked at Merwin. "Lady," he said quickly because there was no time. "Stay close to him. Do not let him be alone. Do you hear me? They are not here to kill the king. They are here to take the king out of your way. They will try to wound him, separate him, leave him for the meisters, and carry you down to the south gate while we are putting out fires. I know how Sigvald hunts. Stay close." Merwin nodded. Her mouth had gone dry as stone. Her hand had gone, without her thinking it, to the small wooden wolf in the pocket of her cloak. Roderick and his men ran for the lower courtyard. Luki drew the long, thin sword at his hip. She had not even seen that he was wearing it. He had worn it under his cloak all evening, as he wore it always. And he caught her hand with his free hand, and they ran together along the upper garden path toward the door of the keep. They almost made it. The 2 men came out from behind the old yew at the corner of the garden, both in dark cloaks, both with short curved blades, both moving fast and silent. They had been waiting there for him. They had probably been there since the lower courtyard caught. They were good. They were very good. Luki pushed Merwin behind him and met the first of them blade to blade with a sound like a struck bell. The second went around him for her. Merwin had no weapon. She had only the small wooden wolf and the pup Ash, who had come bounding up the path behind them, and who lowered his head and snarled at the cloaked man with the unconvincing fierceness of a creature who knew how to act brave but did not yet know how to be it. The cloaked man kicked the pup. Ash flew 6 feet, hit the wall, and did not get up. Something in Merwin, something that had been sleeping under her ribs for 18 years, and had been gently awakened in the chapel over 17 patient days, woke all the way up. It came not as fire and not as light, but as sound. It came as a long, low note that she did not choose to make. It tore out of her throat the way a held breath tears out of a held breath. It was not loud. It was not even a shout. It was a single low resonating note, the kind a struck bowl makes, and it filled the garden, and it went into the cloaked man, and it went into his sword, and the sword fell out of his hand because his hand had gone numb, and his cloak fell open because the clasp at his throat, which was silver, had snapped clean in two and dropped to the path. He stared at her. He stared at her with an open, dumb face like a man who has just heard a language he was told did not exist. "Songweaver," he said. She hummed. She did not even hum a tune. She hummed the same note, quieter, longer, and she stepped forward, and the man stepped backward, and he stepped backward into the wall. And then he simply slid down the wall and sat at the foot of it with his eyes open and his breath shallow, and did not move. She had not killed him. She had only put him to sleep. She had only opened the door of his body and walked the running parts of him out and laid them down. She would understand this later. She did not understand it then. She turned. Lukey had just put his blade through the chest of the first cloaked man. He pulled it free. He looked at her. He looked at the man slumped at the foot of the wall. He looked at her again. He did not have time to ask. The third one came over the garden wall. This one Merwin did not see in time. This one had a small dark crossbow, and he was 30 paces off, and he loosed the bolt at the king's back as Lukey was turning toward her. Merwin did not think. There was no thought. The note in her throat went higher, and it went sharper, and it went toward the bolt the way a hand goes toward a flying glass to catch it. The bolt did not stop in the air. The bolt was not made of silver and could not be unmade. But the bolt slowed. The bolt slowed and dropped, a hand's breadth before it would have gone into the king's back and clattered onto the path between them. The man on the wall stared. His mouth was open. Lukey was already moving. The thin sword went, and the man came off the wall. There was a long, quiet moment in the upper garden then, in which neither Merwin nor Lukey spoke, because neither of them had breath enough to speak, and because below them the lower courtyard was full of the shouts of Roderick's men driving the fire-setters back into the burning stables, and because somewhere in the middle distance a bell had begun to ring the alarm. Lukey crossed the path to her. He did not put his hand on her sword arm because he did not have a sword arm. He put his hand on her face. He cupped her jaw in his palm and he looked at her. "You are Shaking," he said. Sit down, Merwin, sit." She sat. She had to. Her knees had decided. He knelt in the path in front of her. He did not let go of her face. "You stopped a bolt," he said. His voice was wrecked. "You stopped a bolt with a sound." "I did not know I could," she said. The words came out small. "I did not know." "My love," he said. "Neither did I. You are the most." He stopped. He had said a word he had not meant to say. He had said it without permission. His face went still around it. She looked at him. His hand on her jaw had not moved. She said, "Say it again." He looked at her for a long beat. He said it again. "My love." The bell at the lower courtyard rang the all clear. Footsteps were coming up the path, Roderick, by the cadence, with men behind him. Lukey did not move his hand. Merwin did not move her face. The world around them moved. "Later," she said, very quietly. "There will be time for the rest of this later." "Yes," he said. Ash, she remembered then in a small panic. Ash, the pup he was. "I saw him move," Lukey said. "He is winded. I will carry him in. Myra will look at him. He is too stubborn to die, my love." She made a sound that was nearly a laugh. It came out cracked. He gathered the pup gently into his arms. Ash, dazed, put his small black-tipped chin against the king's shoulder and breathed heavily but breathed. They walked together back into the keep. They did not let go of each other's hand. In the deep hours after the fires were out, when the dead had been counted, and the wounded had been carried into the lower hall, and Roderick had gone out himself with a quiet party to harry the running tail of the Blackmore men back across the eastern ridge, Merwin sat in the small audience room with a cup of warm wine in her hands, and the pup Ash in a folded blanket on her lap. Myra had set the dog's ribs and pronounced him annoyed but unbroken. Lukey sat across from her in the same chair he always sat in the same plain black tunic, with the small curl of dried blood at his hairline that Myra had insisted was nothing. He had not changed his shirt. There were 3 rust-dark stains down the front of it. None of them were his. The room was quiet. The keep was quiet. The world was quiet for the first time in many hours. He spoke first, because she was not yet able to. "Merwin," he said, "I want to tell you what I should have told you a week ago and was too cautious to say. May I?" She nodded. "When I was 18, he said, "and I was lying in a hollow tree with my leg broken 3 days from any pack of mine, I made a small private vow. I made it because I thought I would die there. I made it because I had spent the last 2 days alive on the kindness of a southern girl in a green ribbon who had no reason to be kind to me and was anyway. I had not even known her name. I made the vow regardless. I said to whatever god of wolves was listening that if I lived, I would find that girl, and I would find out who had taught her to be kind to a beast at 13, and I would spend the rest of my life standing between her and any harm that came to her, no matter what shape that harm took or what shape that meant I had to take to stop it." He paused. He chose his next words. "I did not know," he said, "that I was making a marriage vow. I thought I was making a debt. I thought I was making a thing called gratitude. I have lived 12 years now believing I was. I understand now that I was not. The wolf in me knew at 13 what the man took 12 years to know. The wolf in me knew the day you put your hand on his ribs in that cage and said, 'You are safe.' He has been mine since that night. I have been his since that night. The man and the wolf disagree on many things. They have never disagreed about you. I love you, Merwin Valen. I am not asking you to love me back. I have only walked 12 years to tell you I love you, and tonight you stopped a bolt for me with your voice, and I will not sleep tonight without saying it out loud." She set the cup of wine down. Her hand was steady, her chest was not. "You said it twice in the garden," she said. That was an accident." "It was not an accident." He looked at her. "No," he said, "it was not." She moved Ash carefully from her lap to the chair beside her. She stood. He stood. He did not move toward her. He had never moved toward her first in all these weeks. He waited. He had learned somewhere in his life that there were things you had to let come to you because forcing them would change what they were. She walked across the small space between them, and she stopped a hand's breadth from him, and she looked up at his face. She had not been this close to him before. She could see the small white scar through his eyebrow. She could see the very faint stubble on his jaw. She could see the dark color around the gray of his eyes, and she could see, now that she was close enough to see it, that his eyes were wet. "My king," she said. "Lukey," he said, "please." "Lukey," she said, "I have been afraid of many things in my life. I have been afraid of my mother dying before I knew her. I have been afraid of my father dying because he was too gentle. I have been afraid of my sisters since the day I understood that what they smiled at me was not love. I have been afraid of the chains and of the road and of the hall. I have been afraid every day since I was a child that the world would take any tender thing I had if I held it where it could be seen. I have never," she said, "been afraid of you." She put her hand against his chest. She felt his heart through the wool of the bloodied tunic. It was not a steady heart. It was a hard, fast, battering heart that did not match the careful man standing inside it. "And I am not afraid of you tonight," she said. "And I love you also. I have been trying not to know it for 2 weeks. I will stop trying." He did not move. He did not breathe. "May I kiss you?" he said. "Yes." He cupped her face in both hands the way he had cupped it in the garden. He did not bend down at once. He looked at her for one long count of breath, as if memorizing her face for some later moment when he might need to remember it. Then he leaned, and his mouth touched hers, and the world for half a heartbeat went absolutely silent. He kissed her gently. He kissed her like a man putting down a thing he had been carrying for a long, long time. When he straightened, his forehead came to rest against hers, and they stood like that for a while, breathing. "Merwin," he said. "Loki, I am going to have to leave at dawn." She closed her eyes. She did not pull away. "Sigvald." "Sigvald has shown his hand," he said. "We cannot wait for him to show it again. Roderick and I will ride east at first light with 200 men. We will not give battle. We will give a message. We will go to the edge of the Blackmoor lands, and we will plant the king's banner there, and we will let it be known that Sigvald Marith has chosen to be the next pack written out of the histories. We will let him come to us. He will. He cannot afford not to." "How long?" 10 days, 12, no longer. I have given Roderick a list of reasons not to let me die. You are the first item on it." She made a small dry sound. "Loki." "Merwin, listen to me carefully. The keep is yours while I am gone. Myra knows. Roderick's second knows. The Chamberlain has been told. There is no one in this house who will not bend a knee to you. I am leaving you the keys. I am leaving you the seal. If I do not come back, the keep and the pack are yours, and the Chamberlain will sign whatever you sign. I have already drawn the papers." "Don't do that," she said. "Don't." "It is only a paper," he said. "I am coming back. I am only telling you in case I am not. I will not have you dependent on the kindness of strangers. Not again. Not ever." She put her arms around him. She had not done it before. She did it now. She put her arms around his ribs, and she pressed her face into the bloodied tunic, and she did not let go. He held her. He held her with the particular surprised gentleness of a man who had not been held by anyone but his mother, and could not quite remember the shape of it. They stood like that until Myra came in with a tray for Ash, and pretended very loudly to be looking at something else for as long as it took them to break apart. She came down to the courtyard at dawn. She wrapped his cloak more closely around his shoulders herself and did not let any of his men do it. She put her hand once against his cheek, and he leaned into it, and she said, very quietly, "Come back." He said, "I will." She watched him ride out at the head of the column. She watched until the gray cloaks were a thin line on the eastern road, and the line became dust, and the dust became nothing. Then she went back inside, because she had a keep to hold and 12 days to get through, and a song to learn how to use without falling over. The 12 days passed in a way that was both very long and very short. Merwin understood by the third morning that holding a keep was not the same as ruling one. Loki had been kind to use the word hold, because it meant only that she was to keep things steady and not lose them, but holding still required showing up, and Merwin made herself show up. She sat in the small audience room each morning with the Chamberlain at her elbow and listened to whatever the keep had to bring her. The grain master came with a question about the winter store. 2 ranchers came with the same dispute over a ram that Loki had told her about, and to her own surprise, she solved it cleanly by ordering the ram penned with a third party for a month, and the kid given to the rancher whose ewe had bred it. The Chamberlain wrote her decisions down and read them back and bowed, and after the second day stopped looking at her as though waiting for a man to walk in and overrule her. She held 2 trials in those 12 days, with Roderick's second, a steady gray-bearded captain called Bryn, sitting at her right hand for the look of it. The first was the trial of Cybella. Cybella came up from the lower hall in the same red wool dress she had worn the night she sold her sister. She had asked, through Bryn, to be allowed to wear it. Merwin had said she might. Merwin had been raised among small kindnesses she had once believed cost nothing and had recently been taught cost a great deal, and she had decided, on the third night of Loki's absence, that she would not become a person who made small cruelties for sport. The trial was short. The evidence was already gathered. The Meister had completed the examination of Lord Edrich's exhumed bones, and there was, exactly as Cybele had said with her own mouth in the guest hall, the unmistakable trace of an apothecary's poison in the ribs and at the base of the skull. The forged debt had already been read aloud and admitted in Cybele's hand. The Blackmore letter, recovered from the chest in Cybele's bedchamber by a small party Roderick had sent quietly south the morning after the fires, was read aloud in court. There was no defense. Cybele did not offer one. She stood with her chin up and her hands folded and waited. When the time came for sentence, Merwin sat in the high seat of her father's name, and she looked at her sister for a long moment. "Cybele Valen," she said. The name came out steady. "By the laws of the southern lands and by the word of this hall, you have killed your father, sold your sister, and brought a foreign blade into the hall of the king who sheltered her. The penalty written in the books is death." Cybele did not blink. "I am not going to write it," Merwin said. A breath went around the court like a small wind. "My father loved you," Merwin said. "Before he loved any of us, he loved you. You were his first child. He told me once that he had taught you to read before he taught any of us, and that you had been so quick at it that he had cried the first night you read a verse aloud to him because he had thought no daughter of his could be that bright. He failed you. He failed all of us. He failed you the most because he forgot, somewhere between the third and the fourth of us, that being loved more by him would have saved you. He stopped looking at you the way he should have. I think you spent your whole life waiting for him to look at you that way again, and it never came, and one day you decided that if a thing was not going to be given you would take it. I do not forgive you. I am not your judge. I am only your sister. I will not write a death warrant for my sister." "You will be exiled," she said, "to the Western Islands under sealed banishment. You will not return to any kingdom under the Southern Crown nor to any pack under the Iron Wolf throne for the remainder of your natural life. You will go in a small boat with a small purse and a sealed pardon for your life. You will go alone. If you come back, the writ is read again and the second writing is the death you were spared. Do you hear me?" Cybele was crying. She had not cried in a long time. She was crying without making a sound. Her shoulders shook once. "I hear you, sister," she said. "You will not call me sister again," Merwin said. "Not in this house. Not in the boat, not in the islands. I am taking the word from you because you have done it harm. Do you understand?" "Yes," Cybele said. "Take her down," Merwin said. The second trial was Rayla's. Rayla was found to have known of the plan and not acted, and her sentence was a softer banishment. To a southern abbey, 3 years of service, no contact with any household of standing. Rayla, who had wept through the whole hearing, accepted this with such relief that Merwin understood her sister had expected to die, and had been preparing in her own way to die with what dignity she could find. Isel, the youngest of the 3 older girls, was not tried. Isel had come to Bryn on the second night and told him a great many things she had not been brave enough to tell anyone before. Isel had told him that she had been writing letters to old Bran, the kennel master at Highmore, for 2 months in a code their father had taught them as children, telling him their suspicions about Cybele, asking him to keep records of the visitors at the manor, asking him to be ready in case the worst happened. Old Bran had kept the records. Old Bran had ridden himself to the southern court 3 weeks ago when Cybele set out for Stormhold with Merwin in chains, and had laid the records before the southern lords, and had set in motion a quieter inquiry of which Roderick had, in fact, already known. Isel had been the inside of that. Isel was 16 and had been alone and afraid and had done what she could. Merwin called her up to the audience room privately and they sat together by the fire, and Merwin took her younger sister's hand, and they did not speak for a long time. When they did speak, they spoke about their mother. Neither of them remembered her. They had both been told different stories about her by their father at different ages. They compared the stories and found that the woman who emerged from putting them together was someone neither of them knew, but both of them wanted to. Merwin told Isel that she could stay at Stormhold as long as she wished, on her own coin and her own terms as a guest. Isel, after a long silence, said she would like to learn from Myra. Merwin said she thought Myra would be glad of it. On the 11th evening, Roderick's outrider came down the eastern road on a lathered horse with news that Sigvald Marith had taken his second-in-command's offer of single combat in lieu of full pack engagement, and had lost, and that the Blackmore pack was now leaderless, and that the new Alpha, the second-in-command, a quiet man called Eirik who had been waiting 20 years, had ridden up to the king's planted banner at first light with no army and a single white cloth, and had asked for terms. The terms had been signed at noon. The Blackmore would not be written out of the histories. The Blackmore would, instead, take an oath to the Iron Wolf throne, and the new Alpha would marry his eldest daughter to a captain of Loki's choosing, and the matter of the southern songweaver would never be raised again under any roof in any kingdom for as long as the iron in this earth was iron. Loki was riding home. 2 days' ride, the outrider said, perhaps less if the weather held. Merwin went up to the upper garden when the outrider was finished. She walked alone except for Ash at her heel. She stood under the old yew tree where Loki had told her about Melia's tear, and she pressed her hand against the bark, and she let herself, for the first time in 12 days, feel how afraid she had been. She cried a lot. The pup pressed his nose against her ankle and did not look away. When she had finished, she walked back into the keep and went to the kitchens and helped the head baker's wife make the bread for the next day, because she had decided that if the king was going to ride home into a hall, the bread should be hers. He came in at sundown of the second day in a column of tired men and tired horses. She was at the gate when he rode through. She did not run. She walked down the steps to him, and he swung off the horse before it had quite stopped, and he caught her against his chest, and he did not say anything for some time. There was no one in the courtyard who pretended not to be watching, but neither of them noticed. He whispered finally against her hair, "You held it." She said, "Yes." He said, "I love you." She said, "I know, come inside, the bread is mine." He laughed against her hair. He had not laughed in 12 days. The sound of it broke something open in both of them. They were bonded 3 weeks later. Merwin had asked for it small. Loki had asked for nothing at all and would have agreed to a ceremony in the snow with no witnesses if she had asked him for that. The ceremony in the end was held in the upper garden under the old yew tree, with Myra and Isel and Bryn and Roderick and Will and Ash present, and the chamberlain, who insisted on his proper place, and the head baker's wife, who insisted on hers. There was no slave bond and no chain. There was only a length of woven gray wool that Loki tied around their joined wrists himself, and a single question he asked her in the old tongue, and a single question he asked her in the common tongue, and a single answer she gave him in both. He marked her gently at the place where her shoulder met her throat. She marked him back in the same place, because she had been taught the choice was hers and had decided to take it both ways. The bond bloomed in her chest like a window opening into another room. She could feel him now faintly, even when they were not in the same hall. She could feel his wolf, which was a quieter creature than she had expected, and which was, she had learned to her amusement, sentimental about her hair to a degree the man within him would never admit. That night in the keep in their room, with the bolt drawn from the inside and the fire low and Ash asleep across the hearth, she put her head on Loki's chest and listened to the sound of his heart, and she thought, very quietly, that there was a kind of love that came after the dying for it had stopped, and that nobody had ever told her about that one, and that this was the kind she had.